We have Mississippi asking the Supreme Court to overrule Roe v. Wade in order to uphold the state's restriction on abortion access. I am Adrienne Lawrence, and I am hosting this episode of The Conversation. And right now we have Kelly Copeland. She's the executive director of NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio. Kelly, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and so right now the oral argument is looming in this massive challenge to Roe v. Wade. What do you think people need to know?
I think that people need to know that Roe is being directly challenged by this case. And it's entirely possible that Roe as we know it will be gone. But I think it's also important that people know that Roe, which legalized abortion in the United States, didn't provide or guarantee abortion access for everyone who needed it because of the Hyde Amendment and other barriers to care. So, things could get a lot worse across the country if Roe falls. But for a lot of people, abortion access has had too many hurdles in front of them for it to be real anyway.
Yeah, indeed. There seem to be hurdles across the board, at least for a certain segment of many communities. In this case here that is going to be the challenger is Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And we know that Mississippi is trying to bolster its law that bans most abortions, I believe, about after 15 weeks. And can you tell us, based on your knowledge and education, why is 15 weeks a really detrimental cutoff point?
Well, because it directly challenges the viability standard that had been in place in previous restrictions on access to abortion. So this is a direct challenge to abortion care. And people, we have a 6-week ban in Ohio. If this case were allowed to stand, it could mean trouble for the 6-week bans, and it could usher in total bans on abortion care. And so it's a very serious case.
Yeah, indeed it is. And we saw that back in May 2021. The US Supreme Court said it was accepting this Dobbs case because it wanted to decide whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortions are unconstitutional. That seems to be a pretty sweeping and broad question here. And we know that we have a conservative court leaning right now. So what's your prediction?
Well, they say fools make predictions over the Supreme Court, so I'll try not to be foolish and predict what they're going to do. But it's not a good harbinger that they have taken the case. They could have said, Roe stands. Other case law that we've had, other precedents that uphold the right to abortion stand, and that this is clearly unconstitutional. The fact that they didn't do that indicates that they intend to make major changes.
Yeah, and that's really scary, particularly with the makeup of the court right now. And we know that last term, Supreme Court had struck down a Louisiana law that targeted abortion clinics, but the vote was 5-4 with Chief Justice John Roberts joining the liberals. But we also had that, hallmark liberal Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's now been replaced by Amy Coney Barrett, who is a conservative, staunch Catholic. How do you see her approaching this challenge that Dobbs is making?
I think she was selected because she was, as was Kavanaugh, because they are expected to overturn Roe versus Wade. I think they were selected for a particular reason, and I would not be at all surprised if that is how they rule. They were selected for that reason. They weren't selected because they were, giants in the legal community. They were selected because they were chosen by anti-abortion and extreme conservative organizations who had vetted these people and wanted them on the court. And they were also chosen because they were so young, so they could be on the court for decades and decades to come.
And that's actually very scary, the thought that they will be potentially on the court for that long. You hope people will retire or, well, all sorts of things. But in terms of their mentality, okay, so a lot of people don't fully understand how turning back Roe v. Wade could truly impact the vast majority of our society, particularly people who are Black and brown and will not have access to abortion rights. And so if you could speak to a little bit about what the true ramifications could look like, that would be great.
Well, I think one of the most important things is that we know that it will hit, as you said, it will hit hardest on people of color, low income people who basically don't have credit cards and cars to be able to escape to states where access could remain legal. And so we could have a patchwork of states, many, hundreds, maybe even thousands of miles, where there will be no legal provider of abortion available to people. And those with means, the ability to, get on a plane or get in a car and flee to a state where abortion is accessible legally, will be available to some people, certainly the wealthy. But what about the rest of us? What about people who can't get time off of work, who can't get childcare, can't get away, don't have a credit card to cover those travel costs? They will be left to either have a self-managed abortion, turn to their own means to end their pregnancy, or to continue pregnancies and give birth against their will. And that has already been happening to people who can't get over the hurdles to abortion now. It will expand to so many more people, and abortion access, even in states where it remains legal, will become limited because there will be, such a need for people to go to the few remaining clinics that will be available.
And that's very interesting, that observation, the fact that it'll be more Black and brown people being forced to have children, because we just saw the census data come out showing that essentially white people are truly moving toward becoming the minority, and Black and brown people are increasing in numbers. And it seems to be that's something that at least the Fox News pundits will take issue with if they have not already. And now we're in a situation where potentially the government and those who are conservative are going to create a larger Black and brown population. Do you see do you see the issue here?
I think that abortion has always been an issue of the patriarchy and white supremacy. It is about control. It's never been about babies. It's always been about who can we control and how can we control them. And one of the fears that I have really is that people will be criminalized, and people who are already over criminalized by the so-called justice system in this country are the same people who will have pregnancies investigated, miscarriages investigated, because medication abortion, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between a medication abortion and a miscarriage. And we had people testify just this week in Ohio, where a city is trying to ban all abortions and any assistance for someone to get an abortion. She spoke about a couple of miscarriages she had, where she needed to take one of the medications that's part of a medication abortion to help end her miscarriage so that she could try to have a child again. Those things won't be available. So, I think a lot of people who think maybe this won't affect me, it will affect everyone.
Absolutely, and that effect seems that it will also be on a grander scale, because if you do have more Black and brown people who are not in a position to have a child, are having children, it seems that especially with issues with prison privatizations and over policing of Black and brown communities, that you're essentially just creating your next wave of individuals who you are now going to force into kind of that slavery system.
Absolutely. And we know that people who are incarcerated don't get access to healthcare when they're there. We saw this with the ICE detention centers and people being sterilized against their will. We looked into it here in Ohio, and a lot of people who are detained get no healthcare whatsoever. And so, the state, criminalizes people and then doesn't take care of them, when they are detained. It is one of the most immoral things that this country does, and it will fall hardest on families. 60% of the people who have abortions are single parents. Think about what happens to those families, to those kids, when their moms are criminalized by this system. Where do those kids go? We know that the state does not take good care of children in its care. We know that it doesn't take good care of people it incarcerates. It is a very troubling set of circumstances that we're looking at, and they're already happening to people on the margins now.
This is very troubling indeed, and we just have about a minute or so left, but is there anything that you really want to communicate, that you want people to understand out there, especially as we have this challenge to Roe v. Wade? What can people do?
People cannot lose hope. There is hope. We know that people will, They have outlawed abortion many places in history and throughout the globe, but people have turned to their own means to take care of themselves and their neighbors. And we know that no matter what the Supreme Court does, there will be activists in every corner of this country who will stand up and say no, and who will take every measure necessary to ensure that abortion access is not just protected, but that it's expanded, because it is a basic human right that everyone needs and deserves. They need to have that access without stigma, without political interference, and they need to be able to get that in their community. And regardless of what the Supreme Court does, there are thousands, millions of activists all over the country who are prepared to take on that fight, who are taking on that fight now, and who will never give up.
Yes, thank you so much. And we definitely need those activists out there. We need people raising their voices. And as you've said, we need people to keep hope alive, because we definitely need people to understand that abortion care is health care. Thank you so much for joining us. Kelly Copeland, Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.